Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody is okay. So, Reece Radford, 26-year-old, killed last year in Sheffield. So he's out, it's the early hours of the morning, and he's seen two men, right? And two grown men, Africans, chatting with a 17-year-old. Drinking, and one of them struck her in the face. So Reece has moved in. He's tried to stop it after seeing the attack on the girl and been stabbed in the heart. The guys went away, left the scene, then they came back, and one of them spun his belt round and hit his friend who was on the phone to... Good evening, Paul. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Big John. Nice to be with you, brother.
So I was just going through the Reece Radford case, telling them how the two guys who killed him, they left the scene, they came back. One of them struck with a belt, struck Reece's friend who was on the phone to emergency services. I just got to that. But, I mean... But forget that, but these two men, grown-ass men, both around 40, was with a 17-year-old girl getting drunk in the early hours of the morning. So, I mean, I know Reece has been killed, but there is a possible another crime coming, could have happened if Reece had not stepped in.
Reece was 26, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Reece was only a young man. I've seen the photos of him. He was tall and thin. He seemed quite a jovial character, well known in Sheffield. So he's at the bus stop. The altercation takes place. He sees the girl hit to the ground. Now, I don't know how you react when you see a man punch a woman, John, but my blood level goes up. I've seen in my own street there were Iraqi refugees. And they punched a woman in the head, another Iraqi, and her legs went to jelly, and I just flipped. I thought, that's not on. It's very, very dangerous for a man to punch a woman because permanent brain damage, you know. So stepped in, didn't he? He stepped in, and an altercation ensued. Now, these two African guys, Owusu, I think his name was, and the other one had an anglicised name. They pulled out a 12-inch blade. Now, we've seen a lot of street gangs, the Africans in London especially, carry these long knives. And usually they slash each other or stab each other in the side. But this guy went right for the heart, put the knife right through his heart. So he had no chance of surviving that. That's a ruthless attack. That's a merciless attack, that. It's just blatant murder. Now, what struck me about this was the whole racial context of it. Because... during the trial, the two Africans claimed that they were racially abused, as if, in the moment, and also that the girl was abused for being with them. Now, none of this was seen on CCTV because it's a very quick incident. It's a flash incident at a bus stop. Now, these guys have murdered a white lad, and they're accusing the white lad of racial abuse. There was no finger was pointed at them, as if, I mean, was this a racially motivated attack? Would they have done this to another African? Possibly, but I very much doubt it. But flip it. Say if it was two older white men, 40-year-old white men, mature white men, with a young black girl or a young African girl, and they punched that young African girl. They'd be outraged at that to start with.
Oh, yeah.
But then if an African lad jumped in to defend her and they put a knife right through his heart, didn't even warn him, didn't even wound him, just stabbed him to death blatantly, there would be absolute outrage about this. This would be a racially motivated murder. It'd be in all the national newspapers. It'd be on the front page. The BBC would have run with it for weeks. And they'd have had all sorts of programs about the brutality of white people against immigrants and so on. But because it's a white victim, it's just been buried, John. This is what really annoys me about this murder of Reece Radford. It's hard to find on the internet. You've got to go searching for it. Even on Twitter, I've tried and looked it up. It's been taken down very quickly. They want this swept under the carpet as quickly as possible. And this is happening on many occasions when there's been sort of immigrants attacking the indigenous population. If you're white, it's like they don't want to highlight it. It's all politics. This is not justice. This is not moral outrage. This is all politicking. Everything is politicized now. And it strikes me that white people's lives are being devalued in the political sphere. And that's because we don't assert ourselves. That's because we've allowed all the voices. Now, when the guy in America was died, the fentanyl guy, what was his name? And they put the knee on his George Floyd. The politicians, led by Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner, they all went down on their knee and they all went on demos for George Floyd and stuff. And Black Lives Matter, it was become a huge tidal wave of protest. But Rhys Radford, his life seemingly doesn't matter because not one politician has responded. Not one national newspaper have exposed what the brutality of this murder. They just want to sweep her under the carpet. And this is politics, John. That's all it is, politics. Do white lives matter? It seems like they've been downgraded now. We don't want any sort of, all lives matter. That's my approach. But, everything's got to be politicized and racialized. And it seems like the blacks have always got to be the victims now. They've always got to be the victims of white brutality. But the whites are still the victims when they're murdered. I mean, Reece Radford, his reputation was dragged through the court. And this was all an attempt to sort of justify in some way what they did. Now, the judge asked these two Africans, he said, well, yeah, you claim you're racially abused, you were provoked. Why were you carrying a 12-inch knife? And they just said, oh, we weren't carrying a knife. The knife appeared from nowhere. And it just shows you what a whole fabrication this all is.
Well, some of the reports said that throughout all the trial, they denied it. They never accepted responsibility, even though they were shown on CCTV. It's what it says in the reports. And I don't doubt it. Also, the picture of Reece that they've put up is a bit misleading. If you look at the picture, he's holding his hand like that and he's got a big chain on and he's like that. And it looks a bit like gangsterish, but this is what they do to blacken your name. These are the kind of things that they'll put up. I pointed this out in hundreds of reports that I do and talk about reports. I pointed out where they've done this to make it look bad. I've also talked about there was the murder of Gledhill. And in that case, again, through the courts, the solicitors and all that tried dragging his name through the court, tried painting him out to be a bad man, so it won't look as bad that how he was murdered. But it never came like that. But this is what they go through all the time. And this is just one of dozens and dozens of cases. It's the 11th murder. This was the 11th murder in Sheffield city centre last year. There is a lot of talk about knife crime and stuff like that. But, immigration, people never used to be killed like this in the old days, Paul. If there was a murder when I was when I was just born, it was more than likely people who knew each other, like a mother and a father and stuff like that. People never got randomly stabbed to death in town centres. It didn't. It was a lot safer then, and stuff like that. But since we've added immigration, we've had people with other cultures, they just think differently. You know what I mean?
The brutality of this, John, is really striking. It was a murderous attack. Simply, I mean, the lad just stood up to protect the girl. I mean, he was just waiting for his bus to go home. He wasn't going out for a fight. So, I'm interested to see the sentencing is on May the 4th. What these guys will get. I mean, will they get life imprisonment? Really? I mean, if there was any justice, to be strung up, a life for a life. That's what the Bible says. Now, we're seeing an epidemic, as you said, of knife crime. I'm shocked by that figure. 11 people murdered in Sheffield in the town centre last year. Sheffield's a very pleasant place. It's a friendly city. I used to go there in the 80s, you know. Everyone knows each other, or at least they used to. And there'd be fisticuffs, there'd be a few argy-bargies of a Saturday night, no doubt. But murders, 11 murders, one a month almost. And because of modern surgery, a lot of people who are stabbed, who would have died recently, now survive. So, you know, you could times that by 10 the amount of brutal stabbings that must have taken place in Sheffield town centre last year. Now, we're facing at the moment, and it's creating a whole atmosphere in this country, an invasion by military-age men from third world countries, the Middle East, from Africa, and from Southern Asia. They're coming in not just on these boats, they're coming in by planes and boats and trains. And they're coming to this country, and we know what they're coming for. They're coming for money. A lot of them involved in criminal rackets, drugs, and of course, a lot of them are coming for sex. And they regard English girls. I mean, what were two 40-plus-year-old men doing with a 17-year-old girl? You know, they were plying her with whiskey, it says, at the bus stop. They were pushing whiskey down her throat. I mean, that to me, that, you know, in the past, someone would have intervened and said, what the hell are you doing there, you know? So these people are literally getting away with breaking all our social rules. And these guys, a lot of these guys who are coming into the country are coming looking for sex, looking for young girls. They're not discriminating on the basis of age. I mean, 16 means nothing to them. They'll go down as far as they can go. So it's people feel threatened. I mean, I saw a video posted today on social media. I think it's Billy Murray. His daughter was taking his grandchildren for a walk through Essex.
Yeah, watched in that.
Eastern Europeans, and they started to get out the car and looking at the kids and approaching the kids. Thankfully, she was with the husband who was out of scene but coming to sight. And he warned people, look, these people are going around in cars. There's been an epidemic of young girls just going missing in Britain now, and children just going missing. 14 a day, they're saying, just going missing, you know. And a lot of these people, like the Albanians, they come from cultures where kidnapping is not unusual. It's quite frequent. And, you know, they'll bring you can take the Albanians, you can take out of Albania, but you can't take Albania out of the Albanians. They have their culture and way of doing things, and it's not ours. We find it very scary, John.
Yeah, definitely, Paul. I'm just going to go through chat. Mark Williams, good evening, sir. Peter Smith, Tommy Howe, Budgie Burger. Arlene, yes, Arlene. That's on at the moment, but for anyone else watching, NHPUK Party Talk with Paul Rimmer, we're talking about Reece Radford murder. And in not one of the reports does it say anything other than a little bit, and you know, the guys denied it, but they don't give you any other details, like they lied all the way through the case, they made things up, they started this racial thing. Don't say it in any of them reports, and I've just been through 4. So why obviously they're hiding it, that racial thing, because they don't want anything to be bad out of it. They don't want people thinking, well, they shouldn't be saying that. You know what I mean? They killed him, but they're using they're bringing race into it, and they all do it, Paul. All immigrants do this now. None, you know. Before, back in the days, like the Indian man wouldn't have done it. There might have been a bit, he might have said something to someone, and then that'd be it. It'd been over and done with. But identity politics, race, it's in there all the time. We hate them words. We hate these politically correct words in this group. And you'll hear me. You'll hear me a lot, and I say PC words or politically correct words. And I try not to say racist, misogyny. I try not to say them words because they are bullshit. Good evening, English weather. But again, if we look at the past, these kind of things never happened. They didn't happen in our society. And if someone was murdered, you could probably know that they knew each other. It wasn't murders on the street. It was people being killed in houses. I'm not saying we was all good. We weren't, because we had Fred West and we've had all these kind of nasty people and all that. But still, they did not work in the open. They worked behind closed doors. But when we come at the people who are coming here now, just think it's all right to stab someone, broad daylight, night time, run into a park, kill 3 LGBT people, rape somebody. They just think it's all right to do all this, and it isn't. And it's one of the worst things about the UK. And I mean, we have all these people who say knife crime is this, that, and the other. Knife crime, we've got it because it's been imported. It's been imported. There was knife crime before, but not the brutal knife crime we have. It's been imported, just like acid attacking, just like rape gangs. This has all been imported. And, you know, it's just unbelievable. But it's, you know, I feel sorry for Reece. If they're painting him in a bad light, I feel even more sorry. And I've been through this with the Gledhill case in Leeds. I called out, before the case had finished, I called out the media. I called out everyone who was branding him. And in the end, he didn't do nothing wrong, but he still got murdered. So, you know, it's so barbaric, Paul. Barbaric.
Yeah, but it's not just individual cases, John. This is the problem. There's massive social and demographic change underlying it. What we're seeing in areas of London and a lot of our cities now is actually a process of ethnic cleansing. If you're white in the wrong area, now I remember just walking in London. I used to live in London in the 80s and went back recently, and I was walking around Elephant Castle at night, and it was a black lad who approached me and he said, "Do you want to watch out here, mate? I'm just going to warn you. You're a target if you walk around here." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, this is a no-go area." I said, "I'm in the heart of the capital city here." He said, "I'm just warning you, mate." He said, I mean, he was being friendly, you know. And I thought to myself, wow, this is the heart of London. And he was shocked to see an Englishman walking around England in the heart of London. And like I used to live in Brixton in London, and there was a heck of a lot of street crime in Brixton. But in those days, the police were limited. They would control it to a degree. But now the police seem absent now. And the only advice you get is keep out of these areas or go elsewhere. Now, given the scale of immigration now, and the fact London has become balkanized, it's not like there's just like, you know, a Pakistani area or an African area. There's everything under the sun. Have got their own little area now. And you've got to know what you're doing, you've got to be very sensitive about what pubs you're going to, where you walk down the street. And none of this is reported, John. It's just totally ignored what's happened. The fact that everything is becoming balkanized in Britain. And given this sheer scale, don't forget, immigration last year was the highest it's ever been. It was over 1 million people came to this country in 1 year. So if this carries on, you're looking at like over the next 10 years, 15 million people coming into this country. I mean, basically, our cities will again be transformed anew. And we don't seem to have much protection at the moment. I think it's just going to get worse and worse. I think these problems are going to mount up.
Yeah.
Because go on, John. The cultures that are being introduced, they haven't got our history. You know, Britain has always been a tranquil country, really. Obviously, there's been action, evil actions by people. That's just natural. But, street crime in Britain, muggings and so on, was virtually unheard of before the 1950s. Now, people used to know each other and respect each other and act in a certain way. But all that is going out the window. When your father came over to Britain, John, in the 1950s, a lot of the Jamaicans that came to Britain were Christian gentlemen. They'd been to church. They used to dress up in the Sunday best. I used to see them in the neighbourhood. They were respectful people, you know. And but the people coming in now, they're coming from all sorts of weird and different societies like Afghanistan and, you know, North Africa and Eritrea. They're coming from brutal places, brutal places. They don't share our culture at all. They don't share our respect, the way we treat women in the social space. They don't like women in the social space. They think any woman in the social space is an opportunity for them. Um, and so society, we're losing that tranquility and the harmony that we used to have in Britain. And in its place is coming a hellhole. But they're doing their best to pretend that it's not. When we see these murders and this strife arising and the, you know, all the grooming and all the sexual abuse that's going on and kidnappings and so on, they're not magnifying it, they're hiding it. We've all got to pretend that it's not happening. And yet our society's fallen to pieces. Everybody knows it now. Our borders are down. People are invading this country. Even the government have said that. And yet no one is taking responsibility to maintain law and order. The police are fed up, really, because they can't do it. It's got to be a politically driven agenda. They've got to secure the borders. They've got to stop all permanent settlement immigration. We've had enough. We've got to try and harmonise the society we've got now. We can't allow this anarchy to continue.
Definitely not. And actually, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party said they're going to sort out policing if they get in power. That's what they say. That's the thing going round on Twitter. Labour will sort policing out. And it's amazing that, like, we're talking about crime and all that, yet the Labour Party have put out the memo saying that Rhys Radford is responsible for letting criminals go loose. And he's relatively new to politics, but Keir Starmer isn't. He was head of the CPS when there was a lot of scandal over Jimmy Savile, but it's unbelievable. But they'll never admit it. They'll never admit anything to do with immigration or other demographics. They won't admit it.
Well, go on, John. No, I was going to say with Keir Starmer, right? As far as Labour go, I judge people by what they do, not by what they say. Labour had power for 13 years. Keir Starmer was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service. He refused to prosecute Pakistani grooming gangs. And Jackie Smith sent that memo out telling the police not to get involved. He targeted Patriots. I mean, I was arrested under his watch on fabricated charges. Now, the police didn't want to prosecute me, but they sent a message to the CPS and said, look, we don't think there's grounds for prosecution here. Keir Starmer replied, prosecute him. It was a politically motivated prosecution. And it went nowhere, but they wanted to tie me down in a legal case, which they did. I was prosecuted 3 times by Keir Starmer's CPS, Crown Prosecution Service, for nothing, just opinions, you know. No crime was committed. I just expressed political opinions. Now, they chose to bring in, I mean, Labour brought in the Racially and Religiously Aggravated Criminal Damage Act, which meant that, you know, they could spin anything to say it was a hate crime. They used this term hate crime to cover any sort of form of political expression, which they didn't like. I wouldn't trust the Labour Party as far as I could throw them.
I wouldn't either. And they have gone downhill. But, you know, something's got to be done about this kind of crime. Obviously, I was involved in an incident where 3 of us were stabbed. One of the lads got clipped in the liver. If it had been any more, they said at the hospital he'd be dead. And he was on life-threatening to emergency or to life-threatening for 12 hours, where it was TikToking and stuff like that. And, you know, like, there was no justice in the end. The young lads just got behavioural orders. And, you know, like, they just didn't do enough, even though one of the lads we had, the CPS had his details of what crimes he'd been doing, Paul. And he started off with a little, like, rubbish crime, and he was progressing. Then he got drugs, and that's, it was so clear on the paper. And it was one of the girls, Ellen, who was with us, said, I've seen this, John. So I pulled the CPS guy and said, listen, I want you to say something in court. His crimes are getting worse. Next time he he's in court. He'll have murdered someone. So you need to like nip it in the bud. Now they never. But you know, I've been through it, and you know, like people say that I shouldn't comment on cases and things like that. No, I'll comment whatever I want to, especially since I've been a victim of knife crime, and I was innocent. We wasn't out thugging anyone or anything. We were just on our way home. Even though at the time we'd been in the on the canal of the gay area where all the bars are, and over Facebook something got said, and a lefty come on saying that we went out to cause trouble. That's why I got stabbed. That's what he said, and mate, it's nothing like that. We was on our way home. We wasn't shouting, screaming at anyone. They started on us and they targeted us. And, you know, I've had a few people say things, but the following night, there were 8 incidents similar to ours. So knives were pulled out, people were slashed or stabbed, and 3 sexual assaults, and 2 of them were rapes. That was a night after in Manchester city centre. It's a dangerous area. Don't let anyone fool you that it's not dangerous. It's a dangerous even during the day. There's been stabbings, people found with knives and things like that during the day. And of course, Sheffield isn't getting out of it because it's the same up there. 11 murders last year in the town centre. I don't know how many are stabbings, and this brutal stabbing on Reece. So, you know, no city centre, no town centre's getting away with it.
In 1964, John, when they abolished capital punishment, Labour got in 1964, Harold Wilson. One of the first things he did was to abolish hanging for murder. And he said hanging was not a deterrence, and it was unnecessary, and it was a risk that you could hang an innocent man. Now, in 1964, there were 24 murders in the whole of the United Kingdom. Last year, there were over 1,200 murders. So look, it's just exploded. Go back to a society which was within my lifetime, where there was 2 murders across the country every month. Now there's 2 murders in every borough in London every night almost. I mean, we're in a different world now, and we need a different approach to the policing. There shouldn't be any softly approach to knives, carrying knives and using knives. It should be totally unacceptable. There should be 0 tolerance of knives. If you're found carrying a knife, it should be a severe sentence. If you actually stab someone, that is extremely dangerous. To plunge a knife into the human body is, as you said, your mate just escaped. Now, I know personally a number of people in London who've just been stabbed, casually stabbed, just walking along the road. One friend of mine had his face slashed in tooting. Another one, the guy tried to chop off his hand and severed the artery of his wrist, and he got emergency surgery and survived. But these are vicious attacks. Now, both of those attacks were carried out by immigrants, African immigrants. It's crazy, John, what's going on. These people, in their culture, they carry knives. We've got to let them know that in Britain, they've been allowed to settle here, but that they can't bring that culture with them. We have to really, you know, put the boot down on that, but they're not. They're not doing that. And so we've had an explosion in knife crime. Everyone's got to carry now. Because certain people are carrying, other people carry, and so everyone's carrying for self-defense. And it goes with the drug trade. So we're creating a situation in our inner cities where, you know, knifings now are just an ongoing event, and they're not even mentioned in the newspaper. Even this brutal killing of Reece Radford, which for me was sickening because it was so ruthless. He did the noble thing. He stood up for a girl who was being attacked, and he got a knife through the heart. It's not on. That should have been a rallying cry to the whole nation. Wake up, there's something wrong here.
Can I just, before you carry on, just want to get one thing in. Reece went to protect a woman, and at the moment, there's a lot of hate against men. Men are brutalized, all these feminists, yet he did exactly the right thing to step in to support and protect a woman. So I want more women to be knowing about this case. I'm going to be going on Twitter for a week now on all feminist pages and all that lot are putting his name on there. So why don't you support him? Because he protected you. You know what I mean? And, that kind of chivalry's gone. We don't see that now, do we?
Well, that's it. I mean, because these sort of incidents would have been so shocking in the past, men would have responded. But now people are reluctant to respond because we become the villain. See, they turned it on him because the two people who knifed him were Africans. They tried to smear him with this race card simply because he's the wrong colour, And it's people think this. A lot of English people now think if they get involved in an incident with immigrants, they will be the villains, even if they're out to try and protect somebody or to keep law and order. The finger will be pointed at them. So we feel like the whole system now is against us. But we've lost confidence really in the state, John. In the past, we saw the state as our protector, an upholder of what was decent, of maintaining our security. But we don't trust them anymore. We don't trust the police anymore. We don't trust the politicians. There's a lack of trust in society now. There's a fear about what lies ahead, and we need political answers, John. This is what the National Housing Party is about. It's saying let's get back to the old normal. Let's get back to normality. What we're facing now is not a normal situation. All these military-age men pouring into the country, into hostels and hotels, and stalking our women. That's not normal. That's not acceptable. What's going on in this country now, and the politicians' indifference is not acceptable. They're not listening to the people, John. They're listening to global institutions like the United Nations, but they're not listening to the people. That's why we need grassroots movements, grassroots political parties. That's what the National Housing Party is all about, to give the British people a voice again. Now in Liverpool, don't know how your local election campaign's going, John, but in Liverpool, there's a party called Liberate Liverpool's been created, and that's challenging the Labour dominance of the city because the Labour Party is corrupt.
Better not have Anna Roffery in it.
No. Well, she was part of the corruption, wasn't she? The corruption is absolutely horrendous. I mean, they were selling off land. They were giving council contracts which were not being done. And then when they were calling the people to account, the people were just going bankrupt. They were giving council contracts to their friends. They were selling land for peanuts to their friends who were selling it on for millions. There was rampant, large-scale corruption throughout Liverpool Council. And I'm sure that's happening in other councils, John. And we need local people. We need local people like yourself and to call these councillors to account.
Yeah, definitely. We had Michael Meacher in Oldham, and he was one. He was always screaming about poverty in Oldham. He had a dozen houses down south that he owned, making loads of money on and all this. And this wasn't public thing. And yeah, the councillors do rip us off. They're not in it for the right thing. They're in it for money and power. They're not in it to do the good that we want. And I've been through this in my last election leaflet. A lot of these small parties are getting involved with ex-councillors. Yeah. And it's not going good. Ex-Labour councillors are arguing like bitches and then splitting up and then causing loads of stress. I've already pointed out somebody in Oldham over 2 years ago. It's called Raj Army. I said, I don't trust him. He's dividing the community. And he personally split up two big groups in Oldham. You know what I mean? And we should stay away from these people. We should have people like me and you who are passionate, and we can hear the passion, and we really want to do something. And we don't just want to be politically correct and run the norm. My leaflet is out there, and no leaflet in Oldham has ever been like my leaflet. None of the UK, anyone who's ever had a leaflet, they're not going to get a leaflet like mine. You know what I mean? And it's out there, Nova, Independent, and all that. All they go on about, and I know it's important, the nicer, and all they go on about is doing a bit of tidying up and email this person. I don't know. Are they bothered about the deaths? So on Elm Road. Now Pat's been on Elm Road. 2 teenagers last year jailed for gang murder, brutally killed a 16-year-old, and they live on my ward. What, am I just going to ignore that and not do nothing? Am I not going to say nothing to the police? Why aren't they doing more stuff like that? You know, being a council, you've got to go above and beyond the call of duty. And I'm going to go above and beyond the call of duty. Other people will be too scared or too intimidated or too politically correct to say the right thing. And for the next however long I'm running in elections, my leaflets are always going to be out there. They're always going to set things on them that no one else will say. And I say it all the time in all my streams. I say it to other independents, said, you're too politically correct. You have to talk about this. You know, there was 100 people went into the council when it was a child sexual exploitation review. And there's nobody's got anything on the leaflet except for me about child sexual exploitation and rape gangs, Paul. It's just, we need to keep these people away from us. I don't trust Reform. I don't trust any of these groups because they're all full of politically correct politicians. And, you know, they're not working them groups for you. They're not working them groups for you. They're working them groups for themselves. They're never going to get in the Tories or Labour, but they're working them groups for themselves. So you don't vote them big parties. You really don't vote them. And, of course, they all support cancel culture because you can't join if you've been in this party or that party, or you've met this person, or you've stood next to this person. You can't join these parties. You know what I mean? It's so...
What I hope, John, is that your leaflet, people like you, people like Liberate Liverpool, local independents, become catalysts for change. We're not lone rangers. We've got to get people around us. I mean, you're in a political party, the National Housing Party, so you got support. You know, we've got to come together in networks. We've got to support each other. And this Liberate Liverpool, they've had a few really significant public meetings. I mean, we've had public meetings on the Wirral where we're standing a candidate. You've got to get other people. I've got to cease to be passive and become active, to get involved. It's an education process being in politics. You learn how the system works. You learn what your role as a citizen really is, to call people to account and to make the sensible decisions. All we're about really is creating the environment where people can live secure, happy lives, where they have a home. Housing is a huge problem now. People can't get access to private housing, never mind social housing. We've saturated the country. As I said, over 1 million people come in last year. We haven't got the accommodation, John. People are struggling. You know, people, young couples and so on. They're struggling to find any accommodation. And the rents are going through the roof. And it's terrible. You know, if you haven't got accommodation now, a lot of people are having to stay in their parents longer. They're having to squeeze into smaller and smaller units, 2, 3, 4 kids in a bedroom. It's horrendous, John. We need people like ourselves to say, look, let's set the priorities right in this country. We're not here to accommodate the whole world and to provide welfare services for the whole world. We can't afford it. We've got to put our people first and our own nation first. We've got to make sure our young people get access to either social housing or decent private housing. And we need political voices that are speaking this out and actually exercising it. The problem with the Labour Party and the Tory Party and the Lib Dems is they're all serving vested interests. They're all keeping the general public, Joe Blogs, at arm's length from the political process, so you can't see what's happening. They're not responding to our needs. They're not responding to our concerns. They're just fobbing us off and manipulating us. And the system stinks, John. It stinks so bad that it's rotten to the core. And we've got to be a purifying agent. We are coming along and speaking the truth. And it's the truth that sets people free. We've got to have the boldness to speak the truth. And we've got to build a party. We need numbers, really. I'm impressed by new organisations that are emerging, but we need other people to join and get involved, have the courage of their convictions, and let's save this nation, John.
Oh,
But
yeah.
John, I'm going to have to go early tonight because I've got to go to a meeting. So are you
No
okay
worries.
to carry on?
Yeah, I'm going to carry on for 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. So, so to do with Reece's murder, I've just seen a post off Billy Pag UK thinking prior grooming. That's what he said. I'll have to check up the post in a bit. Also, I just want to point out that when we had the 3 girl scandal in Rochdale, when the guys got arrested and got took to court, there's 9 of them, 2 Labour councillors stepped forward saying, oh, these give references to Shabir Ahmed, Big Daddy. And then when they realised that he was guilty, oh, sorry, they just rushed in to give one of these guys has got a big position now. I'll just tell you. As usual, you get promoted. And I'll just, I'll get it up so you can all look at it yourself. So, councillor who gave child sex groomer reference, re-elected chairman of Pennine Township. Aftab Hussein, and you don't really see it in the documentary, don't say nothing, but he gave a reference to Abdul Qayyum, one of the 9. And he's just carried on. Obviously, he's not a member of the... I don't know if he's a member of the Labour Party. He's a councillor. Yeah, he's a member of the Labour Party. And he's got a really nice, cushy council position now. And, that guy knew what the other guy had done, and he's not accepting accountability. There's just loads of people like that. That's what winds me up and gets me angry. Then people will say things, well, why don't your community do something? Why do these guys jump forward to give references to paedophiles? You just couldn't make it up. But thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. Big Johnny at NHPUK Party Talk. I just want to thank everyone in the chat. Crags, Pat Sinners, NHPUK Press Off. I hope you got in contact with Pat, Mark Williams. We're not having a monthly meeting until after the elections. Not really. I'm going to go in a minute. I'm hungry. But we'll do something soon. But thank you very much for tuning in, guys. Thank you very much. You've heard our take on Reece Radford, brutal murder. These things just never happened in the 80s or years ago. In a different life, these things never happened. We wasn't so brutal, but it's commonplace now. And as someone said in the chat, I don't know who it were, it's so commonplace that you don't even see it on the news. But thank you very much for tuning in. This is a National Housing Party stream, Party Talk. I've been out today with Peter Brown. He's called the Mole Man, but I'll tell you about that another time. And we've done about 1,000 leaflets. Really good run today in 4 hours. So that's been good. But I'm out next few days. And hopefully my 5,000 leaflets will be done by Sunday. They're going to be done by. Peter's coming out again on Sunday. So they should be done by Sunday. As long as I can get out tomorrow, Friday and Saturday. But thank you very much for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll catch you next week on Party Talk. Don't forget, like and subscribe. Join our website. Put the website up now, link in. We're still after donations. And obviously people to join. Please check out our site. We've got our Kool-Aid magazine on there. And also our policies. are on there. Our immigration policy is pretty big. I've read through that before, but look at it. And we want to scrap the hate crime bill. And it's not just us. It's not a right wing or a far right or anything to do with white, right? Why I said that was this guy, Trevor Phillips, was one of the instrumental guys in bringing the race hate crime to the front. And he's turned around now. He's been cancelled, actually. He doesn't do anything really mainstream because he turned around and said it were a mistake. That's what he said. We're playing into identity politics, this race thing, and even he has claimed that it's not good. You know what I mean? So it's not a white thing. Don't anyone think it's a white thing, that hate crime bill. Even a black person has realised that it's so messed up. But thank you very much, John Lawrence here at National Housing Party. I put the Wikipedia page in for Trevor. Been cancelled now, Trevor. You don't really see him on mainstream telly. And he was on all the time before, but because he's gone against the political establishment, he's been cancelled. But thank you very much. I will catch up with you all on Tuesday. Thank you very much.